WIB 1190 AM, streaming to you across the country on a number of platforms, including Facebook and nationalactionnetwork.net. We're live right here in the House of Justice, 106 West 145th Street. Call somebody. Tell them the action is on the air, and tell them Happy New Year. It's 2022 and we kick off the year right here at the Saturday Action Rally. So you want to call somebody and tell them the action is on the air. The Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton is in the house and getting ready to come to you. We're so pleased to be with you on this Saturday, because if it's Saturday, this is where the action is. Our president and founder is the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. Chairman of the board is Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson, senior pastor of Grace Baptist Church in Mount Vernon, New York. I'm Attorney Michael Hardy. Will be with you throughout the broadcast this morning. We are so pleased to have with us today for our inspirational word, Pastor Carl Warp, and hopefully I got that right. He is the pastor of the New York Live City of Refuge in Hempstead, New York, and we're going to be pleased to have him for our inspirational word today. Also, you know it's Saturday, so we're going to ask, what's on your mind? So we hit the new year, it's 2022, a lot happening across the world, and we're going to ask, what's on your mind? Derek Perkison, our New York field director and liaison, will be here to ask what's on your mind. So you should have something that you're ready to talk about, because again, it's a new year, but there's a lot going on. So share with us what's on your mind. Of course, our musical director, Minister Tyrone Richardson, is in the house. And the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. So you want to call somebody, tell them Happy New Year. Tell them wake up, because the action is on the air, and the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton is in the house getting ready to come to you. But right now, with some New Year information, Dr. Alvin Ponder, the Vice President of the New York City chapter, is going to come and give us some updates.
Thank you, Attorney Hardy. Happy New Year, brothers and sisters. Listeners and viewers, here's some information to keep you in the know. For 30 years, the National Action Network has championed the cause of social justice by promoting a modern civil rights agenda for all. With over 100 chapters across the country, it is a national movement for equality rooted in the spirit and tradition of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Despite the challenges of 2021, we remain committed to our activism and efforts to fight for the voiceless and push for change at the highest level possible, and we're still just getting started. Now, on our website, Nan has released a 2021 year-end review with graphics by Supreme Creative Agency this week, and here are some of the highlights from Nan this year. This is some highlights from the entire year. Sit back and listen. Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy for Andre Hill, the Black Ohio grandfather killed in a police-involved shooting 2 days before Christmas, 2000. During his eulogy, Reverend Sharpton demanded the now fired officer who fatally shot Hill face criminal charges and repeated the refrain, quote, "No more excuses." Civil rights leaders call for Trump's removal under the 25th Amendment in the wake of the shocking violence at the U.S. Capitol instigated by President Donald J. Trump. Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Urban League, President and CEO opportunity to refocus on the work we must do to advance his dream. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, the annual Martin Luther King breakfast did not take place in Washington, D.C. Nan, however, held a virtual award celebration to honor the following stalwarts for their ongoing commitment to social justice. Nan's NYC and Miami chapter stood with the parents of Kenyon Harold Jr., the 14-year-old teenager who was attacked and falsely accused of stealing a cell phone from a woman. The woman, Maya Ponsetto, was eventually arrested and charged, but Arlo Hotels, where Kenyon was staying with his father when the attack occurred, did not do enough to resolve and de-escalate the situation. Attorney Ben Crump joined protesters in Miami to demand accountability. National Action Network praised the Biden administration for signing executive orders to advance racial equity and support for underserved communities. Reverend Al Sharpton and Reverend Dr. Calvin Butts kicked off the Choose Healthy Life Action Plan at the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem with a testing event. The Choose Healthy Life Action Plan provided services including COVID-19 testing, vaccine awareness, and preventive health education through 50 churches across 5 cities in a historic partnership with United Way of New York City, Quest Diagnostics, and America's leading public health experts. National Action Network voiced support for the U.S. House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, which held a public hearing on H.R. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. In the wake of COVID-19, the number of hate crimes directed against Asian Americans in New York and across the nation have steadily increased. Reverend Al Sharpton joined with Asian American advocates, including New York State Senator John Liu, to denounce the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans in the wake of former President Trump's divisive and hateful rhetoric. As the nation celebrated the contributions of Asian Americans during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, civil rights and labor leaders rallied to protest and denounce the ongoing spat of hate crimes against Asian Americans in New York City and across the nation. Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network praised the passage of H.R. 1280, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in the U.S. House of Representatives. The legislation is now headed to the U.S. Senate for debate and a vote. In March, U.S. Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the National Action Network, and Gwen Carr, the mother of Eric Gardner, announced the reintroduction of the Eric Garner Excessive Use of Force Prevention Act, which criminalizes the chokehold and other strangulation tactics under federal civil rights law. If you're just tuning in, we're doing highlights from Nan over the past year, and I'm Alvin Ponder. The nation breathed a collective sigh of relief in April after a Minneapolis jury convicted Derek Chauvin, the former police officer of killing George Floyd a year earlier. The guilty verdict on all 3 counts was a major victory for civil rights and the National Action Network, who stood with the Floyd family from the very beginning. Tens of thousands of activists joined National Action Network's virtual convention in April, while Nan chapter leaders and a select group of panelists gathered at the Sheraton Hotel in New York City for the 4-day convening. This year's convention marked the 30th anniversary of the civil rights organization, founded in 1991 by Reverend Al Sharpton. More than a dozen cabinet officials joined President Joe Biden in addressing the convention. Other panels and plenary sessions focus on media coverage of communities of color, rebuilding amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, and the role of the Black intellectual in the 21st century. At the eulogy for Andrew Brown Jr., a 42-year-old black man fatally shot by North Carolina sheriff's deputies, Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton called on law enforcement to release the body cam video of Mr. Brown's death, who was shot 5 times, including once to the back of his head at his Elizabeth City, North Carolina home back on April 21st. A judge has ordered that the full body cam not be released to the public. The parents of Devel Gardner, the 1-year-old boy who was shot in the stomach last July after 2 men hopped out of an SUV and opened fire on the gathering in Brooklyn, appeared at the National Action Network Saturday Action Rally in Harlem. Police later announced charges against 2 men in the killing. One is accused of being the gunman and is also charged in connection with 2 other murders, and the other is accused of being the driver. Reverend Al Sharpton traveled to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he met privately with President Joe Biden and survivors of the Tulsa Massacre, which uprooted the Greenwood section of the city 100 years ago. Black residents were killed and black businesses were destroyed. Reverend Al Sharpton and civil rights leaders met with U.S. Senator Joe Manchin to press for support of the George Floyd Policing Act. National Action Network praised the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives for the passage of legislation that makes Juneteenth, that's June 19th, a federal holiday. The bipartisan legislation, which was sponsored by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and Senator John Cronin, both of Texas, Juneteenth commemorates June 19, 1865, the day that slavery officially came to an end in America, when the last enslaved people in Galveston, Texas received an order informing them that they were finally free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Texas was the first state to recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday in 1980. Then D.C. followed, and 46 other states. NAN's Youth and College Director, Tyleek McMillan, joined President Biden and Vice President Harris at the White House to witness the signing of the Juneteenth bill into law as a federal holiday. More than 1,000 people gathered to listen to some of the nation's most prominent black theologians, scholars, and preachers analyze Dr. William Augustus Jones's historic 1979 text, God in the Ghetto, under the editorship of his daughter and National Action Network board member, Jennifer Jones Austin. The book was re-released with essays about the book from a wide range of thought leaders, including Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network condemned the United States Supreme Court's 6-3 decision on Brnovich versus Democratic National Committee. Reverend Al Sharpton and other civil rights leaders met with President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris at the White House. During the 2-hour West Wing meeting, the leaders pushed for measures to protect the constitutional right to vote and to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Reverend Al Sharpton traveled to Beatty, Arkansas to eulogize a white Arkansas teenager fatally shot by a sheriff's deputy. He used the tragic occasion to push for support across racial lines for efforts to reform police practices. As the nation paused to remember the life of the late Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Al Sharpton and others gathered at National Action Network's Harlem headquarters in July to push for legislation to protect voting rights. Politics Nation, with Reverend Al Sharpton, celebrated its 10-year anniversary in August. The show premieres on MSNBC each Sunday and Saturday from 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time. Thousands of Americans converged on cities across the United States on August 28, 2021, the 58th anniversary of the historic 1963 March on Washington, to urge Congress to take immediate action to protect the sacred right to vote. In Washington, D.C., Reverend Al Sharpton and National Action Network joined with Martin Luther King III and his wife Andrea and daughter Yolanda to lead over 50,000 activists throughout the streets of the nation's capital to send a clear message to legislators. National Action Network began working with state and local authorities and various community-based organizations to support the victims devastated by Hurricane Ida. Thousands along the Gulf Coast in the Northeast, New York and New Jersey in particular, suffered property damage and devastation as a result of Hurricane Ida. Tragically, the hurricane also caused death. Reverend Sharpton, members of Texas Democratic delegation, and community leaders held a press conference to decry the new state law that bans abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy and to oppose the continued assault on voting rights. Reverend Sharpton welcomed New York City Governor Kathy Hochul and Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin to the National Action Network's House of Justice in Harlem. Nan, Washington, D.C. Borough Chief Ebony Riley joined with a coalition of black women and allies from 30 organizations to call on Congress to protect reproductive and voting rights. Reverend Sharpton and a delegation of religious and faith leaders traveled to Del Rio, Texas to tour the encampment of Haitian refugees. The situation that so many of these refugees face is heartbreaking, and the delegation called for a fair asylum policy that does not discriminate based on race. Nan Youth Director Tyleek McMillan joined National Democratic National Chairman Jamie Harrison on National Voter Registration Day to urge individuals, including college students, to register and vote. And if you're just tuning in, we're doing a year review of what's been going on here at Nan over the past year. Reverend Sharpton called for a street in Brooklyn, New York, named after Confederate Army leader Robert E. Lee, to be renamed in honor of the late United States General and former Secretary of State Colin Powell. Yes. Reverend Sharpton and National Action Network celebrated 30 years of activism at a ceremony at Carnegie Hall. Oh, what a great day. With keynote speaker U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. The event also served as the 67th birthday celebration for our Reverend Sharpton. The event titled, quote, "A Celebration Above All," brought out a who's who from New York's political circle, national leaders and entertainers giving praise to Nan for 3 decades of fighting injustices. As the trial kicked off for the men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery, Reverend Sharpton, at the invitation of Ahmaud Arbery's parents, traveled to Brunswick, Georgia to attend the trial. In an effort to bar black pastors from the courtroom, Reverend Sharpton led a delegation of thousands of faith leaders to march and stand in front of the courthouse in support of the family, and was present when the judge handed down a guilty verdict on all counts for the men involved in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Reverend Sharpton was at the White House for the signing of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. He applauded the Biden administration for the passage of this historic legislation, but added that voting rights legislation must still be a top priority. National Action Network and Reverend Sharpton announced the promotion of Ebony C. Riley to Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategic Partnership for National Action Network's Washington, D.C. Bureau. Ms. Riley is the highest-ranking woman in Nan's history. Nan hosted its annual holiday meal and toy distribution this holiday season, both on Thanksgiving and Christmas. The annual tradition was taken on a sense of urgency in the wake of COVID-19 and the devastating impact that the pandemic has had on families. Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network praised the jury's decision to hold former police officer Kim Potter responsible for the killing earlier this year of 20-year-old Dante Wright in Minnesota. Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network praised President Joe Biden, who said that he supports making an exception to the Senate filibuster rules in order to pass sweeping voting rights legislation. Reverend Sharpton and Martin Luther King III joined more than 800 faith leaders in penning a letter to President Biden urging him and Senate Democrats to act quickly to pass voting rights legislation. National Action Network congratulates former Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams on being sworn in today as the second black mayor in the history of New York City, our 110th mayor. Eric Adams has been a longtime supporter of Nan and was among the original group who helped incorporate the organization in 1991. Mayor Adams joined us over the holiday season at Nan for both Thanksgiving and Christmas to help serve the community and those in need. In addition to some of the highlights we just mentioned, a number of key initiatives also took place at the chapter level across the country. Additionally, Nan has regional offices in the following cities: Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Los Angeles, Jacksonville, Sacramento, and Staten Island, New York. Over the past year, Nan has hosted Legal Night under the direction of Executive Vice President and General Counsel Michael A. Harding. Ashley G. Sharpton has spearheaded Nan's Youth Huddle and Nan's Newark Tech World, led by Pastor Steffi Bartley, who is also the Northeast Regional Director for Nan, has witnessed continued growth, we're pleased to report. Supporting the elderly, the homeless, and those in need continues to be a staple of Nan's work. Whether it's holding leaders accountable, feeding those in need, fighting on behalf of victims of police brutality, or inspiring the next generation of civil rights advocates, National Action Network is ready for the next 30 years and beyond. To stay in the know and to get into action. With all that Nan has done this year, you may visit our website at www.nationalactionnetwork.net to engage with us and to activate with us in the fight for justice and equality for all who deserve it. Happy holidays! Reverend Al Sharpton, the National Action Network, would like to wish everyone a safe and peaceful Happy New Year. Welcome to all of you who have tuned in and joined us, also via live stream at www.nationalactionnetwork.net and also live on Facebook at National Action Network. If this is your first time joining us, or if you are not a member of NAN, we welcome you to NAN and invite you to join us in getting to the action today. For more information and to join, again, you may visit www.nationalactionnetwork.net or call 877-626-4651. Again, 877-626-4651, or just text the word NAN